What's up, everybody? Thralls Metal here once again. I'm Necrotic.
I'm Jammin John.
And we have an album review for you, or rather an EP review. We're kind of digging into the underground a little bit on this one. It's another relatively slow week for releases. Believe me, it's going to pick up later.
Yes, it is. Oh my god.
But yeah, we got an interesting one to go over. We have the latest offering from Cemetery Filth, Senses of Detriment. This also comes out on the 16th of August on Rotted Life Records. This band formed in 2014 in Atlanta, Georgia. This is their second EP. I initially got in this band with their full-length debut, Dominion, which when I saw this band come up, I was like, man, I remember that album. Man, that was a while ago. And it was. It was 4 years ago. So this band has been pretty quiet for a while, and initially they were kind of just like straight up old school death metal, like lots of just, fat riffs and fucking grooves and, the stuff that you expect from just like straight up like 90s death metal worship. But when I looked at like the song titles and the fact that there is a very interesting cover on here, I was like, man, I have a feeling that this band is about to take a big shift in their sound. And I was definitely right.
I'd never heard of this band before today. And when I looked at what they were, it said old school death metal. And I said, okay. And then I listened to this and realized that I have heard it, but I haven't heard it. And that'll make more sense when we get into it.
Right from the rip, I'm just going to go ahead and say that this band is definitely emulating death, and specifically later death. Like 100% around human and individual thought patterns. The first two tracks in here are, at least in comparison to their earlier work, way more intricate, proggy, techy, lots of riff changes, lots of rhythm changes. They're kind of all over the place, but in a very death slash, I don't know, kind of like mid-period Gorguts, like specifically Erosion of Sanity. Like that is what I would say like is a transitional album, because it still has a lot of old school death metal riffage on it, but you can definitely tell they're pushing their sound ahead, getting more technical, more progressive. There's a lot of atheist-ish moments on here, and I would even say that this draws some comparisons to the more recent shifts in style with bands like Horrendous and Tomb Mold. The music is more complex, it's more busy, it's more intricate, and you can definitely tell the bands that they have latched onto, even right down to the vocals. The vocals sound very, very Chuckish.
Yeah, like I swear, like death lives on their sleeve. On one side, you have Chuck Schuldiner bouncing around going, yeah, you guys are doing a good job. And then on the other arm, you have Luke LeMay from Gorguts, who's also going, yeah, you guys are doing a good job.
And he's just being like the nicest person on the planet because, again, he's just like the nicest guy.
Yep.
Like, seriously, like, I'm pretty sure he told him, like, oh, you guys are going to be in the studio for a while? Do you need me to watch your dog or your cat? I can probably wash your car while you're out there. Anything to help out.
Yeah, I can come over to your house and vacuum your floors or change the filter in your air vents. Anything to help out you guys because I care.
He reinforces, like, every, like, good Canadian stereotype. It's awesome. Production-wise, like, instantly, I kind of got reminded of Individual Thought Patterns then, because, man, the drums are loud.
Everything is loud.
Very, very loud, very gritty. Like, in terms of, like, the death metal sound they were going for, like, I think this still has a lot of their, like, old sound in it, especially in terms of the production. Like, it's very raw, very gritty. The guitars kind of have a gross sizzle to them. It does not sound overproduced at all. In fact, it kind of sounds like this is like an in-studio recording.
Yeah, it really actually sounds to me like they were live in the studio as a band, and instead of doing individual tracking like you do for most albums, they just played it all together, because you can hear a lot of little nuances that would allude to that, like tempo shifts that aren't necessarily, I think, a part of the song. Sounds like a lot of like little happy mistakes were made.
Yeah, and that's mostly in the first two tracks, Intrepid Ways and Cyclocognition. That's one word, and it's definitely made up. The first two songs on here are very jarring and like full of just crazy shifts and like kind of jazzy tempos and really wild bass work on here. Like the bass work, I mean, honestly, it was another thing that reminded me instantly of Atheist. It was like, dude, bass work in here is nuts.
Well, the bassist is only 18.
Crazy.
Which is crazy, because the bass work is really, 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 really good. Especially if you're going to make a death comparison. Yeah, the first two tracks kind of remind me of a band being in the writing process and not really sure of the direction they want to take. Like, they have a root idea, and they're like, okay, we want to sound like this. And so if you're in a band, you know what I'm talking about. Like, you start writing a bunch of parts and you're like, well, that's cool. How do we fit these together? And the first two songs sound like they were in the writing process and they were just like, all right, we have all these cool parts. Fuck it, let's just put it in a song and see what happens.
Yeah, I would have to agree. Like, the first two songs in particular, I feel like you're kind of getting in on the ground floor when it comes down to this band's change in style. Like, there's a lot of clever ideas. It's just, again, like the arrangement. It feels a little jumbled and, you know, everything hasn't been fine-tuned. It's par-baked, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
When it comes down to this style of music, you know, especially with like all the bands that we have mentioned here, I think it has to be like a little bit tighter, and it's not quite there yet. The drum work in particular, sometimes I feel like it can be a little bit off. And in terms of like the drum style, especially when it comes down to the accents and the off-time rhythms that come in, a lot of this reminds me of Richard Christie, especially his performance on, you know, Sounds of Perseverance, where, you know, great drum performance, very technical, very just, I have to hit everything in one fill. And that was always kind of an issue I had with that drum performance, is it is too busy at times. And I get a lot of that on here, and it is to the point where sometimes, like, you know, coming in and out of a transition or like a roll or a fill, sometimes that note going into the next rhythm can be like just a hair off.
Yeah, like there are some definite tempo issues. There's a really, really noticeable one on the title track, Senses of Detriment, when they come out of a kind of a jammy bridge that they're in. When they go back into that riff, in the first few moments, you'll notice there's just a little moment where it drags, and you're like, ah. But again, that's what makes me think that this was recorded live in the studio as one take.
And they definitely utilize a lot of tropes of these bands that I would say they clearly emulate here, especially like riff isolation. Riff isolation seems to pop up a lot. Cyclocognition in particular, there is a transition into this more proggy kind of like crawling harmonized riff. And they isolate that riff and kind of just let you hear it for a second and then go into the like off-time rhythms and such. And it's very much a Chuck move. In fact, you hear this all over Death's work regardless of the era. And Cosmic Wraiths, I think they probably got as close to pull the plug as they possibly could without like lawyers being contacted.
Yeah, there is one part in there specifically where it's the do 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 do, and it's like right there.
Right there.
Yep.
But when it came down to the other two original tracks in here, the title track and Cosmic Wraiths, these songs felt more put together. And I think large in part is I think they are a little bit closer to their older sound. Like there's more old school death metal elements on there. Like you get some Morbid Angel tremolos. They lay on riffs a little bit longer. There aren't as many, you know, big jarring shifts or like going into like jazzy, you know, off tempo, like weirdness and such. It's still technical in a way, but it's more like subtle. It's not about like just being very lavish on here. It's about laying down good riffs and then building upon them. And then like, oh yeah, you get this like cool little transition over here that was pretty awesome. And those songs stuck with me more, namely because there was more to kind of just latch onto, especially Cosmic Wraiths. Cosmic Wraiths, there's a more sinister vibe to it. The isolated double time drums that come in, like it kind of starts off like, all right, this one has a groove right away I can latch onto. Boom, in comes the riffs. It's got a Morbid Angel tremolo to it. There's even some more like just straight up kind of like doomier moments to it where it's just like single chords just hammered on. Like, it's like, ooh, all right.
Yeah.
Kind of just getting things down to bare bones. And then towards the end, they start getting more technical as they go on, but the song's already kind of like established itself. It's got a good hook right away. It was just like a little bit more digestible. Like it serves just death metal in general rather than just being like more progressive and technical.
It was a little bit more cohesive. It's like they felt comfortable with it. Like the first two tracks are all about experimentation. At least that's what it sounds like. And then you get down to the title track and Cosmic Wraiths, and it sounds like they're definitely more comfortable with this because it's more in their wheelhouse. Like there's still experimental moments in it, but overall the songs are more of what they've been used to in the past. And you can tell they just seem more confident when they're playing it.
And in between the last album and this EP, there's definitely been some lineup changes. In fact, there's only one original member. Though this album, I believe, was recorded as a 4-piece, it is down to a 3-piece now. And the bassist and the drummer are both new. So there's a lot of like growing pains, especially when you're selling into a whole new sound here. I like the fact that there is a foundation here for a new sound, but I also feel like in between the last album and this one, there might have been like, you know, another step where they kind of just started, you know, leading in these more technical elements just a little bit, like kind of teasing them like, this is the direction we're going to go. And then the next one kind of like full bloom in terms of the more progressive side.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, that's kind of what Chuck did with Spiritual Healing. And we know that this band loves Death because the last track on here is a cover of Vacant Planets off of Death's Human. And honestly, they did a really solid job with it.
Yeah, they actually, to be honest with it, they nailed it. And it has at least what we think is a different mix. The drums have a little bit more compression on them. The guitars aren't like so loud that they're blowing your speakers. Like they really, I think, paid attention to it and dialed it in because, to be honest with you, it's pretty spot on.
Yeah, and that does kind of circle back to the production, at least on the first 4 tracks. It feels more like a rehearsal or a demo than like a flat out EP where it's been like, you know, really mixed and mastered. Like I get wanting to go for a raw sound, but I feel like there's still some mud to scrape off this one. Plus the guitar tone for what they're doing, it's a little too raw and a little too squawky, especially if you want to get into like more intricate harmonies and like you really want to like go after those like killer like Atheist and Death hooks.
Right, you need something a little bit more crisp for that so everything shines.
And I like the fact that they did go with a deeper cut off of Human, like most people would go after, like, you know, the bigger songs there. You know, Vacant Planets is an awesome song. I mean, pretty much every song on that album is awesome, except for Cosmic Sea. I'm still not like a big fan of that one. But overall, I think this was pretty decent. Like, it's definitely got some rough edges and stuff that needs to be hammered out in the future in terms of, like, pursuing this change of direction here. But as for a kind of launching point for a new sound, I'm still going to give it a 3. There's a lot to build on. Like, they have, again, this nice foundation of ideas. And, you know, there's a lot of bands that are actually doing this right now. And I kind of like this style. Like, hearing this, like, old school progressive death metal sound, like, again, Atheist and Death and such.
Horrendous.
Like, you know, Horrendous and Tomb Mold doing it too. Like, I like that stuff. And I can get all the old school death metal I want from a ton of other bands.
Yep.
And I'm totally cool with that too. But this was kind of a rough shift. Like, I feel like this is a rough draft for what they're going to do in the future. And, you know, hopefully they get like some better production on it and, you know, take the time to like really hammer out the songs, because at least the first 2 still feel just very disheveled. But the second 2 feel way more put together. And I like the fact that the technical elements are played down just a bit. They're still there, but riffs. Riffs are diplomatic. Every metalhead loves riffs. I don't think I've met a metalhead that didn't love riffs. And if I did, I would have so many questions. Like, namely, why do you even like this music? Because this is riff-based music.
Right.
But yeah, overall, if you like stuff like Death, Atheist, Gorguts, mostly Erosion of Sanity, again, I'm going to kind of narrow it down to just that album.
Yeah.
And again, like new Tomb Mold, new Horrendous, check this out. Pretty decent start.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with all of that. I'm going to give it a 3 as well, mostly because there's definite talent in this band. And like we have been talking about this entire time, like the foundation for it is definitely laid. While the first 2 tracks are pretty disjointed and not really cohesive, like I see what they're trying to do. And the camps that they are drawing from to make this sound and to make these songs are pretty top-notch as far as technical, you know, proggy death metal is concerned. Like, there are not camps for amateurs. Like,
no.
Not at all. So the music talent is there, and I see what they're going for. They're not quite there yet, but I get it. You know, I've been in bands myself, and I understand the writing process and how it all works. And, you know, you just jam on ideas, and you're like, okay, how are we going to fit them together? I see what they're doing. Then you get into the second 2 songs, and they're pretty spot on. I think, again, because they're more in their wheelhouse and more in their comfort zone. And while they've added new things to it, they still pretty much are solid on what they're doing. So I get where this band is going, and I get what they're trying to do, and that's why I give it a 3, because I'm really curious to see where they go from here once they have all these puzzle pieces put together correctly. And also, covering Vacant Planets, imagine joining a band and they're like, okay, we're gonna do a death cover, and everybody's like, you sure about that?
Zombie Ritual.
Right. And then we're gonna do Zombie Ritual, and they're like, no, we're gonna do Vacant Planets, and everyone's like, hold on. That's a big beast to tackle, and they did it really well. So once again, I think that speaks to their overall talent as far as playing music on a professional level. If you like any of the bands that we've mentioned, mainly Death, because this band wears death on their sleeve, Atheist, Newer Horrendous, Gorguts, Erosion of Sanity, maybe a little bit of like Dysrhythmia and Behold the Octopus. Like, I see what they're doing. So if you're into any of those bands, I'd recommend checking this out. I dig it. 3 stars.
So, if you enjoyed this review, give it a thumbs up. If you are new to the channel, subscribe, because we do stuff like this all the time. We are also on Patreon. If you'd like to help us out there, there's a link down below, thrallsmetal.com. Our Patreon link is there. It is also on our channel in the banner in the bottom right-hand corner. But if you're looking for Thralls Metal stuff, you have to go to thrallsmetal.com. We have t-shirts, both old and new. The old ones are discounted, provided we have your size. And we even have hats too, so if you're looking for any of that stuff, click the link down below.
Tons of stuff going on at Thralls of Metal, as always. Album reviews, discography rankings, states of metal, is it not metal, Nick's never-ending collection updates. We've been doing a bunch of discussion topics, which seem to work out well. We even do live streams pretty frequently anymore, which have been a lot of fun. Thank you to everybody that participates in that. Really, all this stuff that we keep doing is for your entertainment, and ours, I guess, but mostly yours. Partially ours. Anyway, yeah, all this stuff we do for you guys. We appreciate you. Thank you for being a part of Thralls of Metal. It's absolutely awesome that you guys pay us as much attention as you do, because I don't get it, but you do, and that's what matters.
Our parents didn't pay much attention to us, and that's why we do this.
And it shows.
Take that, Mom! I'm just kidding. I love you, Mom. Anyway... yeah, thank you guys so much for everything you guys do. And again, tons of content coming your way. So one more big thank you, because you guys are absolutely awesome. And we will catch you later.